crowd.
Good morning. We will call to order the January 14, 2014 meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. At this time, I'd like to invite Deputy Teddy Floyd with the Indian River County Sheriff's Department to lead us in the invocation, and that will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Tim Zort. Teddy, welcome. Would everyone please rise?
Let us bow our heads. Father, we come to you as gratefully and as humbly as possible. We come with thanksgiving on our lips, God. We come thanking these men that are in position to guide our community. God, we thank you for our sheriff, all our chiefs, and everyone in their respectable positions. God, we ask that you give them the wisdom, the knowledge to continue to lead this community safely, calmly, and with their faults and everything that we do. God, we ask that we just let you handle it. We are thankful for you. We're just understanding that it is 2014, God, and I'm just thankful for just being here. We ask that you pray a special prayer for all of our commissioners, God. Special prayer, God. Look down on those guys, God. And when it's over, we'll give you the praise. Let us say amen.
Amen. Amen. Please join me in facing the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teddy. Commissioner Zort.
Thank you. Thank you, Teddy.
Under the additions and deletions to the agenda, we did have a call from the administrator's office this morning under public discussion items 10B1. Reverend Mosley will not be able to attend today, so we will reschedule his remarks at a date in the future, so we'll delete item 10B1. Gentlemen, are there any other changes to the agenda?
Move as amended.
We have a motion from Commissioner Slurry, second from Commissioner Fletcher. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Proclamations and presentations. We have a presentation by Missy Elward and Frank Menino on the St. Baldrick's Foundation Head Shave event scheduled for March 1st, 2014. Missy and Frank, and I think a special guest is here.
Couple special guests.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Hi, good morning. I'm sure you folks remember Autumn Height from last year's event. We honored Quentin.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. So we're going to start a little slideshow for you guys to watch and for everyone to watch while we're just saying a few words. It's a 3-minute slideshow. By the end of the slideshow and every time it rotates, one child will be diagnosed with cancer. Just to kind of let you know the impact. It takes just a minute to impact an entire generation of kids with cancer. First of all, we want to thank you guys for being a part of last year's event. Our goal was $50,000. We managed to raise over $106,000 in 7 weeks. We were going to shave 50 heads. We shaved 150 heads, including pretty much all of yours. So we're hoping that you will be involved this year. You being a part of the event really made an impact on Indian River County last year. It's very important that we get the support of everyone that we know. So we will talk about that in a few minutes. And let me just say, and I wanted Frank cringes every time I say this, I'd love to shave 300 heads this year and raise $200,000. Okay? I'm going to let Frank take over for a moment and just give you a little quick background, and then we'll just take it from there so we don't take up the time.
And before I get started, again, thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. I want to introduce a very special guest, and this is Vincent Saputo, one of our honored children who was diagnosed in 2007 with cancer, and today you are cancer-free, and thank goodness for that. We really don't have to look beyond the picture of Quentin and Vincent to understand why we do this.
Yeah.
And I want you to just understand again that St. Baldrick's is completely a volunteer-driven organization. 98% of all the funds raised go to children's cancer research, the research that has fortunately made this guy cancer-free. So we are delighted to be here with you in Indian River County for our second annual event. I do cringe every time Missy says $200,000 because I can't conceive of that number. Couldn't conceive of $106,000 last year. But Missy was right. And so we're shooting for $200,000. We're excited about it. we know that Commissioner Fletcher has agreed to shave his head.
Signed up.
Great, thank you very much. And of course, Commissioner Davis missed out last year, but he did a great job on stage of auctioning the various heads of the various commissioners. This year, I'm absolutely convinced, Commissioner Davis, that you are not only going to be the auctioneer, but you'll have Missy Elwood shaving your head.
I appreciate that, but I am doing the Celebrity Dancing with the Stars, and that's going to be enough self-humiliation to do that without having to do that bald for...
Think how great it would be if you were bald doing the...
You might be able to be lighter on your feet.
Yeah, without a doubt.
You might get some sympathy.
Without a doubt.
And Commissioner O'Brien, thank you again for last year. You looked fabulous with green hair.
Yeah, and just let Missy know I've never forgiven her yet either.
Wait a minute, I think you came to me with that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And it's grown back beautifully, and it's not green, so...
It is on St. Patrick's Day again, right?
It
Yes.
is on March 1st.
Of course,
It's a few weeks earlier.
give or take a couple months is fine with the
Yes, yes.
We're not that particular.
So good. We thank you for stepping up and again shaving your head. Commissioner Zork, we spoke earlier,
Yes.
and I know your feelings on, but you have such a gorgeous head of hair that we would just like to take away for a few months.
Dismantle it.
And think how proud your son will be when he sees his dad doing something very special for the likes of Vincent and other children. Give it some thought, Commissioner.
Okay. I will.
Commissioner Solari, again, we thank you last year for stepping up, and we know that you had some personal issues with cancer, and we hope that we can rely on you again this year to come out on March 1st and shave with us as you did last year.
Thanks. I'm like Wesley. I have to get the approval from my wife. Unlike Wesley, the chances are better that my wife will say yes. But
Well, good. Excellent. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Reingold.
Mr. Reingold would love to do it.
Mr. Reingold, why don't you go ahead and step up and...
This would be real easy for you to say yes. We just send him.
I think Attorney Dylan Reingold has volunteered to shave his head. I think we all have heard that.
Yep.
Perfect.
And you'll sign those forms today? Absolutely.
And County Administrator Babb, we hope that you'll come out on March 1st. We thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you all out there on March 1st. Thank you very much. $200,000.
Good deal. Is that Vincent going to speak?
This
Say a
is
word,
Vincent.
or-
Vincent, you want to say something? Sure. Go ahead.
Great.
Thank you for all your support for St. Baldrick's, and I hope you participate.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, most certainly. Come on up, Vincent.
I know last year it worked out pretty well. If you need to get a hold of either one of us, the commissioners know how to get a hold of us. Our website is www.stbaldricks.org/events/Indian River 2014. I think the phone numbers on the air worked well last year as well. Frank's number is 772-633-4452. I can be reached at 772-643-2893. We will be on Marshall Littlejohn's show again at the end of the month. So thank you very much. We really appreciate that. If you need anything, you please let us know. And if you'd like to keep these photos, we'll make sure that you guys download them to your computers.
If you'd give us some information, we'll put it on our website, to the Indian River County website. If you'd send some information to my email, we'll put it on the website. so
Great,
people
thank you,
get it out
thank
there.
you. We have some. We'll send you some press releases on a couple of events we have going on.
What do you have to do to sign up? Because I'm going to sign up, so...
Same thing. Go to the website, and all you do is sign up as a shavey, just like you did last year. If you need some help, we'll sign you guys up as. I think we have you Team BOCC up again. I believe
It's up and running.
Joe is the captain, so
Ready to go.
Commissioner Fletcher is the captain.
Good deal.
Bring it on. So if you can't donate hair, at least let's...
That's right. If you don't want to shave, it is fine. There are plenty of other things that you can do.
We
for
accept
us.
small checks.
We accept checks. We accept.
They grow to large checks,
cash.
but the hair
That's
grows back.
right. That's right. So there's plenty of things that you can do. We have We'll send you the information on our auction. We have an auction event on February 22nd at 6:30. You can purchase tickets for that. All proceeds go towards St. Baldrick's Foundation.
Free for the auction?
What night?
February 22nd at 6:30.
What night of the week is it?
It's a Saturday.
Saturday night. We'll send you all the info, Wesley, and then you can look at it and decide.
Okay.
Okay? All
You
right,
could
great.
make it a hair-raising experience.
Thank you.
Their grazing experience.
Instead of grazing, it'll be raising.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well, there we go. The gauntlet has been issued, I believe.
And we have a few participants already.
Yeah, I'm really impressed that our new county attorney, Dylan, has stepped up
To the plate. He's been there all through it all. He's bold.
What a great commitment he's made. And
Yeah.
so we're very excited about that. Thank you, Dylan.
Remember, his wife is watching.
It's not a big loss.
Dylan.
Okay, we'll proceed here, gentlemen. We have a presentation of the St. Johns River Water Management District's 2013 Water Supply Plan by Jim Gross, the Technical Program Manager, with the District Regulatory, Engineering, and Environmental Services. Jim, welcome. Good morning.
Well, thank you so much. It's kind of hard to follow an agenda item like that. It's
Right.
not really a matter of life. And
Jim, you too can sign up to have your head shaved.
it's kind of shaving itself.
No boundaries.
But yeah, that sounds like a good cause.
I think that's a yes.
You'll have to catch me in Gainesville.
You can donate online.
Hey, Teddy, before you leave, just let the sheriff know we're going to need a sheriff escort for Mr. Gross here on March 1st from Gainesville to Vero Beach.
No problem, sir. I'll take care of that.
Thank you very much, Deputy.
Mr. Chairman, as Teddy's leaving, we realize Vincent's dad serves in the sheriff's office. Teddy, if you can bring that information back to the sheriff, that perhaps maybe sheriff's office can step up and have a team as well this year, as all the other law enforcement agencies have.
I'll shake mine for him.
There you go. I think we have a team already.
Going out on a limb there.
Thank you.
Jim, my apologies. We're just a little hair fixated here this morning, but we'll try again. Jim Gross, Technical Program Manager at St. John's. Good morning,
Thank you.
Jim.
Yes, good morning. Yes, I do work for the Water Management District in Palatka. I'm a geologist by background and have been there about 11 years. I'm here to talk to you today about the District Water Supply Plan. It is a plan that looks out 20 years into the future throughout our area here. It's an 18-county region, and we're going to kind of give you a state of the water resources as it exists today. Is this a page down button next? Click the mouse. Okay. So this is the outline of what I'm going to talk about briefly. I'll try to be very brief today, 10 minutes if I can manage it. What is the District Water Supply Plan? What are the future water demands? We look out 20 years into the future for water supply planning. This is a statewide convention. Other states may look at different horizons. Florida looks out 20 years. We'll talk a little bit about what some of the water supply options are for Florida, for this region, and for the St. Johns River Water Management District. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the regional water supply planning processes and results that we have to date. And I'll talk a little bit about the importance of local involvement, because we want the plan to mesh well with local communities, governments, counties, cities. And I'm going to talk just briefly about what some of the opportunities are for public participation, because we do have meetings coming up. Okay, so what is the water supply plan? It is a plan to meet water supply needs through 2035. So we're looking a little bit farther out than 20 years right now, but not much farther. Our baseline year for comparison at the moment is 2010. So when you look at some of the data that I show you today, it's being compared to the year 2010. We do an evaluation of water resources. We basically are looking at, can we meet all the future demands without any adverse impacts to water resources? And I'll talk briefly about some of the things we look at with respect to potential harm. And we look at potential sources and options to supply needs if traditional sources don't appear to be adequate to meet the projected demands. We'll talk a little bit about funding mechanisms, and we update this plan hopefully every 5 years, at least we're required to under state law. So this graph shows you actually some historical data. It's not something that we typically show when we're looking at a water supply plan, because they're very forward-looking, and this is sort of a hind look. And there's actually a good story here that's kind of good to tell. And it says, as we look at population projections on this graph, which is the line there with the dots on it, you can see a pretty steady trend upward from 1950 to 2010, which is our reference year. But water use kind of plateaued out starting in the 1990s. And there were a variety of explanations for that, but the good news is that per capita water use began to decrease because of a whole variety of things, from water conservation, new plumbing standards, a whole variety of things. Reclaimed water was a big part of it because people began to become more accepting of the use of reclaimed water starting in the early to mid-90s. So a lot of variation is really due to climate. So on this particular graph, you can see 2000. Am I able to point with this? And it shows up on the screen? Yes. Okay. So 2000 was a drought year. That was an epic drought. And so you can see a lot of water use that year. 2005, a big difference 5 years later. These are incremented at 5 years. This was the most active Atlantic hurricane season on record, so you can see a much reduced water use in 2005. So there's more than just conservation and reducing per capita water use at work here. There are other factors as well. These are broken up into various categories. Typically, we see 6 categories used statewide, but the big ones you can see on the bottom is blue. The dark blue is public supply, which has a fairly steady increase throughout most of this period. And then the green is agricultural self-supply, and that is actually reducing right now. It has reduced in the past for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is homes taking over areas that were in agriculture. So here's a forward look. So these are projections. All the districts statewide go to the Bureau of Economic and Business Research, which is with the University of Florida, to get population projections. And those population projections are combined with per capita water use. And we make projections forward. These are just standard projections, not necessarily mean a forecast of this is what will happen. It's sort of the base case. Here's what would happen with that population projections at Bieber medium levels into the future with the per capita water use that we're using today. So you can see it's a fairly steady for both because we're not changing any of the assumptions here. Again, public water supply on the bottom in a light blue, steadily increasing. There's a slight decrease in the light green, which is the agricultural self-supply. That is, again, due to two major reasons. One is the development over agricultural areas, but another significant one has been some of the troubles that the citrus industry has had over recent years, particularly in the last 10 years. So we have 4 planning regions. This is probably the third major update of this water supply plan, and there have been different regions over time as we do planning. The entire district is actually a water supply planning region, but we have broken it up really into sub-regions because there are at least 2 areas of our district where there's inter-district planning going on. And so up in the northern part of the district, this light blue here we call Region 1, but it's surrounded by a larger regional planning area that is being conducted in cooperation with the Suwannee River Water Management District because they have a number of minimum flows and levels there that are kind of troublesome right now for some of their water bodies. And then you're probably familiar with the Central Florida Water Initiative area in Central Florida, outlined with this sort of pinkish looking line, which encompasses a fairly large portion in Central Florida with 3 water management districts involved: South Florida Water Management District, Southwest Florida Water Management District, and the St. Johns River Water Management District. So the St. Johns is basically highlighted in this here. Not exactly real easy to see, but most of what's shaded that's not in these in CFWI, that's all. These are the 4 planning regions: 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're in 4 right here in Brevard and Indian River and a portion of Okeechobee counties. I think I've already covered this, so I'm going to skim over it really quickly. I spoke to this over the map. Water resource analysis. It's an assessment of the amount of, basically the amount of fresh groundwater that is available for water supply. Fresh groundwater is the source of almost all the water that is used for public water supply. However, there are notable exceptions, particularly in this area where brackish groundwater is being used as well. And we determine impacts to water resources if people were to get everything they wanted from fresh groundwater or brackish in some cases. And we look at impacts to groundwater quality. We look at potential impacts to wetlands, to water bodies that have what we call MFLs. Those are minimum flows and levels established. MFLs are actually rules that have to be, we have to adhere to those rules. Flows and levels cannot go below any levels that are established by rule. And then we also look at spring flows as well. Basically, the results are that traditional groundwater sources, both fresh and brackish, can meet some but not all of the projected water needs into the future. Okay, some but not all. In fact, it's really probably a small portion and not all. There is a projected, we call it a deficit, if you will, that the projections exceed the groundwater availability by approximately 250 million gallons per day out at the planning horizon over what we call sustainable limits. Those would be limits not necessarily to what your well can make. We can pump much more than sustainable limits. It would be limits without causing additional problems to these things that we're looking at in terms of water quality, impacts to wetlands, lakes, and you name it. So the Florida aquifer is an extremely prolific aquifer. It is the main aquifer that's used district-wide, and it is able to produce quite a bit more water than might necessarily be sustainable in most of the district.
What was the name of that aquifer again?
Most people refer to it as the Florida aquifer.
Right.
Some people call it the Florida aquifer system because it has multiple aquifers in it. Most everybody's using the upper Florida aquifer, which is the shallowest portion of it. It's basically rock, it's limestone, and it's millions of years old. Okay, so what are the options? This is not rocket science. This is stuff you've probably seen before. Water conservation actually can do quite a bit, and it can do more or less depending upon what you want it to do. I had the opportunity to intersect with Commissioner Solari this morning, and I understand his per capita water use is quite low now because of measures he's taken voluntarily.
Rocks use a lot less water than turf.
And he doesn't have hair to wash.
Indeed. So the estimates for water conservation range from, I think it's in the low 80s to possibly maybe 240 or so MGD, depending on how aggressive you get with the water conservation options. I think we did our analysis based on a $3 per 1,000 gallons equivalent cost for savings. One could spend more money on that and save additional water compared to sort of the more conservative amount that could be done. Management techniques include such things as storing water underground, storing water in reservoirs, above ground reservoirs. Could be things like wetland hydration to mitigate impacts to wetlands. It could be a variety of other things depending on where you are in the district. In this part of Florida, I'm thinking it might be hard to do things like aquifer recharge because it's really hard to get water into the Florida aquifer system. It's just too deep. But up in North Florida, and even in Central Florida, there are opportunities to actually recharge the Florida aquifer system if there's a source that we can get to economically. And think probably of that being probably river systems, the major river systems. But even they have limits to the water that's available. Okay, this is Region 4. Let me just briefly zero in on Region 4. It's basically, it's in green here is shown as Region 4. It's basically Brevard, Indian River County, just a little sliver of Okeechobee County. The reason Okeechobee County is included is actually because this is just the very most headwaters of the St. Johns River system that flows north all through, half of the Florida Peninsula to discharge all the way up by Jacksonville. So it is included in Region 4. These are the Region 4 specific projections. Region 4 is a little bit different than some of the other regions because of agriculture decreasing more than other areas. We're showing that agriculture is decreasing in most of the regions, but in Region 3, we're seeing tremendous increase in agriculture in Osceola County. And that's associated partially with biofuels, but it's also associated with the Deseret Ranch, and they have a variety of operations on that farm. Population growth is projected to vary between 1 and like 1.4% district-wide. This is kind of a slower part of the district. Right now we're seeing about 1% per year population growth rate. Now again, these are Bieber median projections. Things could totally change, and that's why we update the plan and periodically so we can capture any changes in the trends in population growth. Region 4 water resource analysis results. Because there's a tremendous decrease in both groundwater and surface water in Region 4, there's not a huge deficit. So there's actually projected to be decreases in groundwater pumping for agriculture. So we're saying that there may be something on the order of a 3 MGD deficit compared to what a sustainable level would be. So it's really probably the smallest of the entire district. But we do see the problems. You're probably aware of these problems because you're familiar with what your water resources are that comes out of the well. Chlorides and TDS, total dissolved solids, are a big issue in this part of Florida. The Florida aquifer system never really got totally flushed completely of salt water when the Florida Peninsula actually emerged from being underwater for most of its geologic history. So there's still lots of relic seawater in that aquifer system, and it flows pretty sluggishly in this part of Florida. We do see a little bit of potential for wetlands at moderate risk, mostly some with high risk. This is not an issue that we have a lot of certainty on right now. These are results that have come out of the recent update for the model that's now being used for the Central Florida Water Initiative, which is a relatively new groundwater model. In the 2000s, there were some changes to Florida law that tried to better link land use planning, which is done at the local government level, with water supply planning, which is done at the regional level by the water management districts. And the direction that was given is that if the water management district, in its function as a regional water supply planner, sees that there are potential problems with insufficient amount of water from traditional sources, then it's to notify local governments through this planning process to let them know, and local governments are supposed to react to that. And most of them do this anyway in terms of their comprehensive plan amendments and to do basically water supply facilities plans looking out at least 10 years into the future. And so a lot of most local governments are doing that anyway with their facilities. Some smaller ones may not be doing that. Importance of local involvement. Like I said earlier, we want to ensure that that the plan as it exists now in draft status reflects local needs. We want to make sure that the population projections are accurate. Maybe you have some information that we're not aware of that we haven't captured in the planning process. That happens. We do want to see engagement to communicate to local officials what we see as the issues related to water supply. So we'll be having a variety of meetings with utility staff and these kinds of meetings with elected officials to advise you what we see the problems are. And we'll want to identify projects to meet demands into the future. Here are some of the public involvement meetings that are coming up. They go from as far south as Vero Beach all the way up to Jacksonville. So we're planning to try to get all of this done by mid-February and try to close down the public comment period by February 20th. But if it's not all done by then it'll probably go on a little bit longer than that.
Jim, can you go back and point out to me on that graph where the Vero Beach meeting is?
Yeah, I didn't see the date.
Viera. Viera is coming up on February 4th, so for Brevard County.
And the meeting in Indian River County
Actually,
is
that day, Commissioner, there's 2 meetings in Viera that day, actually. There is I believe we have a county commissioners meeting in the morning. Yes. And in the evening, there is going to be just a public workshop, I think at 5 o'clock, same location.
But nothing in Vero Beach.
And just the briefing to the commissioners in Vero Beach. No public meetings here. So we have this is a list of what our public meetings are, inviting the public to come and to give us input and what they think is good or bad or missing or shouldn't be in there.
Okay.
So Vero is about 75 miles away?
I don't know if it's that far, but it would be nice, since Indian River County is part of the St. John's Water Management District, and we are the headwaters for the St. John's River, and we do have substantial holdings in reservoirs that flow north. It kind of would be nice if you all would have a public meeting here for the general public to come and give comment.
We might possibly be able to do that. We'll take that under advisement, Commissioner, and bring that back to district management with that suggestion. That's how the Jacksonville one got on here. We had a meeting up in Jacksonville, and it wasn't originally on there. It just was the Palatka one, and that was the same comment we got up there. It was that it was just too far away to get to Palatka. So that's a good comment.
I'd like to
photo round trip. It's a long ride.
I'd like to just ask a couple of questions, and it is, I think, a little bit critical of the plan to be looking 35 to 2035 and the water supply. The first one is, why is there not even any consideration of desalinization? I believe that we don't have a water shortage. We've got a cheap water shortage. And we've got a lot of water to the east of us out there. We just need to make it to where you can drink it. And with that being the case, at what point, and even in the planning, at what point do we really start looking east versus underneath us and to our rivers and streams? And with it not even being in the plan, that's I find short-sighted.
Well, absolutely. I didn't drill down that deeply enough to talk about seawater desal, but it's in there. Okay. There are projects identified, potential projects, more of a representative nature of what could be done. There was actually one that was moving forward farther north up in Flagler County you may be aware of. It was called the Coquina Coast Project. It kind of is on hold at the moment because population growth in Flagler County dropped off precipitously. But there are seawater desal projects mentioned all up and down the coast in the plan. Some of these go back from plans in the past where population growth was extremely high, and so there was a thought that we really needed to go quickly to seawater desal, but probably isn't figuring as prominently as it has in past planning efforts by the district, but it's in there.
Okay, then one other. Whenever you talk about the southern boundaries of Region 4, with that map that went over a little bit into Okeechobee, with a little bit of talk about a reconnect between the South Florida and the St. John's, as far as the ability for that water to basically flow either way. I know there's a line there and you've got to draw a line there, but it really, especially what just happened over the weekend, or in the last week anyhow, you had like 18 inches of rain or whatever in one spot just to the south of us. Now granted, that didn't happen here, but it did happen, in some areas further south. And in looking at this, to stop at a line and to say that, okay, if we've had 12 inches of rain in northern St. Lucie County, we need to start looking at ways of having that go north instead of all to the south, as Mother Nature, quite frankly, had it intended at one time, until we started piping and diking and all that kind of stuff, and really specifically start looking at ways of keeping that torrential rainfall from going into the lagoon and causing problems that we're just now probably realizing.
That's a very good observation. And people actually are working on that right now, as you may be aware of. There's some private efforts looking at a project in northern St. Lucie County. Groveland Reservoir is the name of the project, looking at opportunities to capture just that very thing, stormwater and runoff that's coming down into the estuary that's above and beyond what is needed in the estuary, and see if there are opportunities to catch it, store it, treat it, and then maybe put some of it into the St. Johns River and let it flow north so that it could be captured by others who need to use it into the north. And you're absolutely right. That county boundary between the two counties is nothing but a political boundary. Doesn't really stop groundwater from flowing back and forth. And it, in times past, I understand, depending on where what got more rain, it flowed north or south across that county boundary.
Jim, before you go, Commissioner Slurry had a comment, I believe.
Yeah, I just saw, following up on that desalinization, the county itself some years back had an alternative water study, and it showed that desalinization, especially for I think a low population county like Indian River, is very expensive, and probably much more expensive than an alternate water supply like surface water storage. And our plan actually recommends, I believe, at the end of the day, surface water storage, and significantly because of the cost.
No, but what concerned me is looking at this from here to Jacksonville. Then surely there's going to be a time whenever I think it's going to start to come in play, and here it already is.
Probably, but as Mr. Gross said, I mean, they've got a lot more in their water supply study than Mr. Gross.
Yeah. And I didn't realize
articulate.
That.
Yeah,
I hadn't read the total plan
We need
yet.
to thank Mr. Gross for not going over everything in the study today.
Okay. You can submit comments to me. You can go online. The public can do both. February 20th is the date we think that comments will be closed down, so we can bring this to our board. But we don't want to shut down comments, so if there's a need to go longer than that, you just let us know.
Okay. Any further, Commissioner Slurry?
Yeah, some years back, the St. Johns River Water Management District had an artesian well abandonment program, and probably because of funding reasons it was discontinued. I was just wondering if there's any chances of that coming back in the future.
That program has its supporters at the district. I'm one of them. And actually, if you were to look at in one of our planning documents, you would find that we have sort of resurrected it as a program under water resource development because it saves water. And we don't actually have a budget item, a line item in the budget for it right now. But there are a number of things that we're doing right now that don't have a specific budget for. So I would say it's feasible if there are wells that needed to be plugged that they could be done. We have what we did in the past is we cooperatively cost shared with local governments to plug those wells instead of letting them flow and waste fresh water.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And if you have a chance, if you can point out that portion of the study to me, because I'm probably like Commissioner Davis, I don't want to read the whole thing. I've read portions of it, but I'm not going to promise I'm going to read the whole thing. Second one is funding sources. Are there any funding sources available for alternative water supply studies? We're probably a little behind where we should be in our alternative water supply development, and if there's anything available from St. John's, I want to make sure we're aware of it.
Yeah, studies, not putting a major effort into funding studies right now. We have in the past, in fact, we did a lot of that in the past, sort of planning level studies. Recently, most of the cooperative funding has been directed to cost share for construction of projects, alternative water supply projects. So we're funding projects this current fiscal year for construction, and the district plans to fund next year perhaps on the order of $30 million or so for construction. Now, I don't think there's any that studies are necessarily precluded if they're extremely needed, if there's something additional information that's needed, but we don't have a cooperative cost share program per se right now for studies.
And I probably wasn't clear. I don't mean to do an alternative water study per se, but rather a study on a specific project, which would need to be done before you begin the
maybe like a
reuse
preliminary design or something of that nature.
Exactly.
There's nothing that we're doing at the moment that is funded for preliminary design, but we have done so routinely in the past, so it could happen again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bet.
Any other questions?
That's good for me.
Jim, I had one question, if you could help me with it, I guess. I guess Indian River County is under year-round water restrictions. We have certain days you can water based upon your address and odd and even and stuff. And a lot of that is an educational issue to, get the public aware of all that. But I've also been receiving a lot of emails from the district regarding the application process for a major water bottling company that's looking to, I think, at least double their consumptive use permit to millions of gallons a day that they want to pull out of the Florida aquifer and bottle it and then sell it for a profit. So my problem is, how do I walk down to my neighbor, Joe Smith, and tell him, Joe, you can't water your lawn today because we're under water restrictions, but don't worry, this major water bottling company can suck out millions of gallons a day and make a profit on it. Can you help me explain to my neighbor how I get that educational concept across?
And that is an often heard comment, Commissioner, and it's a legitimate concern. The restrictions on watering lawns, outdoor irrigation, of course, are district-wide. In fact, they go beyond just the St. Johns River Water Management District. So it's not just Indian River County. It goes all the way to Georgia. Under Florida law, the districts indeed are a regulatory agency. They issue permits for water use and can, in theory, deny an application to use water. But who makes that decision and on what basis is what I would ask back. I mean, people use water for commercial uses, all kinds of commercial uses. Budweiser makes beer in Florida, and they have permits for that. There are soft drink bottlers. Overall, beverages are probably 0.5% of the water use in our district. Still, it's 0.5%, and that's something to be said for. These are questions that are sometimes difficult to wrestle with, but commercial, there are all kinds of legitimate uses. Agriculture is a legitimate use of, it produces food. Water is a beverage. People buy it, they drink it, it's a convenience. The particular instance I think you're probably thinking about is Niagara, in I believe it's Lake County. And they are proposing to actually do something that's a little innovative in their application to the district. They're proposing to drill a deeper well and go all to the lower Florida aquifer. It may not be very good water quality for using directly for potable. They're proposing to treat it, to remove the salts through membrane processes, and to then ship the concentrate over to a local city, the city of Groveland, to use in their reclaimed water system to not waste any water. So they're hoping to be able to mitigate some of the impacts from pumping by going to a deeper aquifer and to not waste any water, so some of that concentrate will go on and be used for reclaimed water, where it's blended with other reclaimed water, so that it can still be used. Is that in the public interest? I think most people think it will be, but it is a tough question when you get to some types of uses, whether or not bottled water is something that's right for Florida or not. But it's not a big part of water use. So,
you just mentioned there's going to be a shortfall of 250 million gallons a day, and I would think every gallon's important. Our region is 3 million gallons a day shortage. I would think a couple million gallons a day is important. So it's hard for us to go to the local community and say, no, you can't use water, but somebody else can. It's just a hard thing. And, I could see if we're not on restrictions and there's plenty of water, and yeah, have at it. But when you're telling people they can't water their lawn, but we're going to let these guys take out more, it's tough to make the public educated on that. So, and I'd just like to reiterate, we would really like a public hearing here in Indian River County on the water supply plan. So if you could take that back to PLEC and the powers to be and ask them to schedule something. Commissioners, I'm sure we can make this building available one evening if they need to, and we can make sure it's televised or taped or whatever. So we'll be glad to work with you on that. But we really would, I think, like the Indian River County public to be heard.
It's a great facility.
Let them see Building B, too. I always think for that type of informal evening meeting, it's just more comfortable and less intimidating.
Very good point, and I would just say let's offer up any facility we have to make this happen.
Also, and we can share it with invite the folks from Okeechobee to come over as well, since Region 4 goes partially into Okeechobee.
Okay. Gentlemen?
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
And you too. Thank you for coming down. Okay. With that, we move to the approval of the minutes of November 19 and December 3rd, 2013 meetings.
So moved.
Motion for both minutes from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Flesher. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those carry unanimously. Informational items, we don't need to take action on this, but I did just want to highlight that we do have a retirement award for one of our emergency services employees, Mr. Scott C. Smith, and he is retiring after 34 years of service to the county, and just want to acknowledge Scott's contributions and service to the county and for those 34 years. And I see John King back here. John, if you'd please pass on to Scott our appreciation for all he's done here for the county. Okay. That takes us on to the consent agenda. Gentlemen?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Davis. Is there any discussion? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to have a consent agenda item pulled for discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. Constitutional officers and governmental agencies. We have Leslie Swan, the Indian River County Supervisors of Elections, authorization to expend reimbursement revenues for costs associated with conducting the municipal elections. Letter dated December 7th, 2013.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Flesher to approve the authorization. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you, Supervisor. We appreciate your being here this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay. That takes us into public items. A, public hearings. Margaret Fuller's request for abandonment of a 74-foot by plus or minus 33-foot portion of Dublin Drive that fronts 9440 Dublin Drive, Lot 6, Block D, in the Summer Place Unit 3 subdivision. Memorandum dated December 30, 2013. And we welcome our Community Development Director, Mr. Stan Bowling. Stan, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This particular application is to abandon a small segment of Dublin Drive. It's located in Summer Place Unit 3, a little bit east of A1A, and the intersection of Dublin Drive and Sand Dollar Lane, a little bit to the south of that, shown in the yellow portion here. And this is a dead-end portion of this right-of-way, which was platted many years ago. It's a little bit more than 30 feet wide and about 74 feet long. This particular portion of right-of-way is not needed to be extended anytime in the future. Properties to the south already have access off of Pebble Path. And this particular segment of right-of-way serves really only the applicant, Ms. Fuller, here in Lot 6 that I'm pointing to. You can see from this slide here, the entire area is zoned for single-family development. And for this particular application, the owner of Lot 6 is coordinated with the owner of Lot 5. When we have a right-of-way abandonment, if the abandonment is approved by law, half of the abandoned area goes to each adjacent property. But the Lot 6 owner and the Lot 5 owner have an agreement, and in fact a deed has been prepared that the entire right-of-way segment, if it's abandoned, will go to Lot 6. Again, through our process with the Technical Review Committee, we do contact owners of properties that surround this particular right-of-way segment. We've had no objections to this particular application. In the review process, none of the reviewing agencies found a need to hold on to and retain the right-of-way. But the Utilities Department does have a water main in a portion of the right-of-way, and for future utility purposes, such as water or even sewer, if that were to happen at some point in the future, the recommendation to you all is to retain a utility easement over the entire segment of right-of-way. That'll still help the applicant. They'll still have more buildable area, be able to do driveway and fence improvements, that type of thing. But it will allow for current utility uses and future utility uses to be accommodated. Staff's recommendation is that the board authorize the chairman to execute the abandonment resolution with the condition that a utility easement be retained over the right-of-way, and the resolution before you all is structured to do that. Be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Stan. Any questions of staff? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. We'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this matter? Okay, seeing none, close the public hearing. Gentlemen?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Slaughter, seconded from Commissioner Flesher to approve staff recommendation. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Stan? The next public hearing is the Community Development Block Grant Neighborhood Revitalization Project, the West Wabasso Sewer and Drainage Improvements, Phase 1. Proposed amendment to reduce the number of hookups and related beneficiaries estimated at the time of application. Memorandum dated January 6, 2014. Mr. Vincent Burke, our Director of Utilities. Vinny, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you. And for the record, Vincent Burke, Director of Utility Services. We're here today to present some information to the board for consideration about the modification number 3 to the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant Sewer Phase 1 in the West Wabasso area. I'd like to thank also, for the public record, the outreach and support from Deputy Floyd and for Julian Price for the amount of work that they did in trying to solicit some of the folks that are in the area to do the income surveys and to go literally door to door to try to get the information during this process. Unfortunately, we were not able to get all the connections that we anticipated, and that's the subject agenda that we're here to talk about today. I also have here with us Corbett Alday, who is our representative to help us with the grant program, and Corbett has put together a presentation that he'd like to go over with you. So without going into all the details, I'm going to defer to Corbett to go through his presentations, and at the end of this we'll be able to open it up for public comment to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Vinny.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you very much, Commissioners. Vincent Corbett Alday with Guardian Community Resource Management, Grant and Public Financing Compliance and Planning out of Lakeland, Florida. It's our pleasure to serve the county. This is a public hearing to consider a modification to reduce the number of hookups in a current community development block grant that was submitted in 2011. It's a $750,000 grant, federally funded through the state and then sub-granted by the state of Florida through the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity through a competitive application that was funded. There are two public hearings for new applications and a citizens advisory task force that meet to consider options for each application. The Utilities Department, Community Development Department, Department of Health staff work together as a team with Guardian on this several different proposals and presented to the Citizens Advisory Task Force and to the board in 2011. Those options were a housing rehabilitation for low and moderate income persons. The focus of all community development block grant programs are to benefit low and moderate income houses in one of four ways, and this housing is one option, housing rehabilitation for code, safety, wind resistance. Neighborhood grants such as the West Wabasso project that we're discussing, which is public infrastructure, water, sewer, stormwater, for a neighborhood that is predominantly low and moderate income. Commercial, which is downtown or commercial CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency, redevelopment of the public areas, parks, parking, sidewalks. And then economic development, which requires a business partner and is based on job creation, water, sewer, traffic, whatever that business might need that's public. The West Wabasso project was recommended by the Citizens Advisory Task Force and the Utilities Department to the board. It was approved. It involves new sewer to eliminate on-site septic systems that were having problems, and also some drainage improvements to a canal for improving flood and drainage. Sewer was phased due to cost. Obviously, the cost of new sewer is expensive, and so phase 1 was along the north side of 510 for new sewer, and then along the south side, flood and drainage. And then a phase 2 was projected where we would flip sewer on the south side and storm and drainage on the north side. The county funded the hookups with SHIP and local funds to make the connections to the houses, to those who volunteered, and to put in the laterals so that the sewer is available to everyone that was planned in that project. The county also prepared the design plans and specifications with permit applications for that application to be ready to proceed. And then Department of Health staff and sheriff staff and partnered and went door to door to get income survey information. And Guardian worked with the staff to prepare that application, and it was funded. There, in a little bit more detail, is your service areas. On the north side is your sewer, phase 1, and drainage on the south side in phase 1, and then those areas would just be reversed in phase 2. There is a budget, the current grant budget, sewer mains and lift stations, drainage improvements, grant administration, total grant, and then hookups and related cost for leverage. Up to $125,000 could be counted as leverage, but the actual cost was much higher than that to put in all the hookups and also to bring the lift station up to the current standards of the system. So your actual cost is $938,000, and the county paid, invested that money above and beyond the $750,000 of grant. The work is complete. The sewer is available to all the properties planned. There was a neighborhood effort, again, to go door to door and have public meetings to get participation. Everyone was notified about the availability of SHIP dollars as well, and everyone that volunteered and participated and qualified was approved and got SHIP assistance to make their hookup. And after all those efforts, they still only have about 43 connections out of 53 estimated in the area. The request of the amendment is to reduce from 53 to 43 the hookups and then the related beneficiaries. The application draft and then also the request for modification is in the packets for the public, and there are packets outside alongside the agenda. And the modification reduces the score of the application, but it still remains within the fundable range. Basically, they score the applications and they fund until they run out of money down the scoring list. The grant modification is required to close this grant out so that we can proceed with phase 2. And that's the biggest issue that we have with continuing, is we need to be working towards phase 2. We know we have a lot of interest in the program. We did have a Citizens Advisory Task Force to consider the same modification on December 19th, and they voted unanimously to recommend to you to approve the modification. Thank you very much, and we're here for questions.
Thank you, Corbett. Gentlemen, any questions? Commissioner Slaughter?
Thanks. I'd like to reiterate Vincent's words thanking Julianne Price and Teddy Floyd. And the type of groundwork they did was really, I think, necessary for this. Yes. On the numbers, you said that there were 53, if I understood it, 53 possible hookups in the area, 43 hooked up. And do you know how many of those 10 that didn't hook up were rental units as opposed to owner-occupied?
I think they were almost all rental.
So you got basically all the owner-occupied?
Predominantly those that volunteered and did hook up were owner-occupied, and predominantly those that not were rentals, income-generating properties.
And on phase 2, do you know how many opportunities there are on the other side of the street?
There's about 50 again, about 50 possible hookups again.
Thank you very much.
And Commissioner Slaughter, whenever we had this meeting on December 19th, it came up that what we'll most likely do is be more realistic going into it, understanding that not all properties will tap into it, and be able to separate those out by income-producing properties versus homesteaded properties and absentee owners.
That'd be great.
Still, it comes out to 80% participation rate, which that's pretty good.
It just shows you how bad the project was needed.
Right.
In the next project, we could just estimate 80% or 75% participation and anticipate that now. So,
Okay. Any further questions of Corbett or staff? This is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this project? Good morning.
Good morning. Julianne Price from the Health Department.
Teddy Floyd from the Sheriff's Office.
We would just like to thank the Commission and Utilities for being responsive to the community's needs. And we believe this project was very successful, and we look forward to Phase 2. So thank you.
We just think about from the days when we had the brown water to now where we are. Commissioners, we are truly thankful. And that community, you just don't know. And that brings a tear to my eye. Thank you so very much.
It is looking nice. I was in there getting some firewood this last cold snap, and from a gentleman that I get firewood from, and the paved roads there on the north side of 510,
yes, sir.
East of 66th Avenue, and how that's really changed that community. It looks really nice compared to the way the way it used to.
That's what we do. Yep. Change lives. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think we had the easy job, as Vinny and Commissioner Solari said. We really appreciate the legwork and the hard work that you all have put in to make it a success. So thank you all for
We're
what
going to
you've
do it. Thanks, Utilities. Thanks again, man. Thank you so much.
done. Any other comments? Okay. Anyone else from the public that wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman?
Second.
And that's alternative one?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, seconded from Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you both. Item 3 is an amendment to Section 100.03, amendment or repeal of ordinances of Chapter 200, General Provisions of the Code of Indian River County, codifying and publishing the ordinances to re-adopt the code up to and including Supplement 100. This is a memorandum dated January 7th, 2014, and we have our Deputy County Attorney, Mr. Bill DeBraw. Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, this is just a housekeeping matter. Every year we have to adopt and codify the code. That's what we're asking you to do today as far as open the public hearing, take any comment that may be offered by the public concerning the matter, and approve the codification of the code.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions of staff? We'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Gentlemen?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Solari, second from Commissioner Flesher. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. The public discussion item was pulled to be rescheduled. There are no departmental matters. That then takes us to the county attorney matters, 2014 committee vacancies. Mr. DeBraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today the Commission has 3 different committees to address as far as vacancies are concerned. This is as a result of the annual expiration of some of the committee members' appointments. You made the blanket appointments back in November. Now we're here to take care of the individual vacancies. There's a vacancy on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. There is 1 vacancy and 1 applicant. There are 2 vacancies on the Construction Board of Adjustment and Appeal. There are 2 applicants there that are qualified. This is the only adjudicatory board that there is, the other 2 being advisory in nature, and a member of an adjudicatory board such as Planning and Zoning or Code Enforcement, in this case Construction Board of Adjustment and Appeal, that is given the duty to, or given the ability to fine people or take sanctions against their equivalency certificates, cannot serve on any other boards as far as the dual service there. The last that you have is the Enterprise Zone Development Agency. There's a vacancy for a member of the public at large and a vacancy for public at large with the unexpired term ending in January 2015, and there are 4 applications. We would just ask that you go ahead and make the necessary appointments, being cautious that any appointment made to the Construction Board of Adjustment and Appeal could not be made to the other boards. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions of Mr. DeBrawl? Bill, the only question I have is your office has, when you said applicants that have qualified, they meet the residency requirement, or if there's a specific spot for like an engineer, you all have verified they meet that. And in the ones where we only have 1 applicant for 1 vacancy or 2 applicants for 2 vacancies, we're not necessarily obligated to appoint either of those if the board doesn't feel they wish to do so. We could re-advertise or continue looking.
That's correct. It's at the pleasure of the board.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll throw this out in order to move this along. I move that we approve the ones where we have the same amount of applicants for the same amount of vacancies.
Second.
Okay.
And for discussion, I just want to note that the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, which has 1 applicant for 1 vacancy, that committee hasn't met in a couple of years, and a couple times that it tried to meet a couple of years before that, it never got a quorum, and I probably need to be more aggressive in seeing if we can get the state to just, it's still here because the state requires it, but I think that there ought to be a small county exclusion and just have us 5 Board of County Commissioners basically act as the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee if anything does come up, but there doesn't seem to be anything for about the 5 years that I've been here, and I think the reason why there was never a quorum is because it never did anything when it tried to meet. So it's a long, just sort of information item about it.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Slurry. The motion on the floor by Commissioner Davis is to appoint Linda Ann Morgan to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee and to appoint Larry Thomas Hall and William B. Shue, Jr. to the Construction Board of Adjustment. That was seconded by Commissioner Slurry. Discussion. Mr. Wilson, do you wish to speak to this motion or the next item?
It's whatever is your pleasure. As you know, we had some press over the last week about the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce, and I was not able to get on the agenda in time to answer some questions and talk to you about that. But since it does have an effect on certain boards and vacancies, I elected to come and perhaps answer some questions here. I don't want to interfere in what you're doing, so if you want to finish your business and then have me give you some information and have you ask your questions, I'll be happy to do that, whatever is the pleasure of the chairman.
Yeah, I don't think that now would be the time for that. These are just basically affordable housing and Board of Adjustment for construction.
I couldn't tell from the agenda whether it included enterprise zone, EDC, things like that.
We have the enterprise zone. That will be next, but that's where we have 4 applicants and 2 vacancies. And
all right,
so that may be more appropriate, Mr. Chairman.
I don't.
Just call me up whenever you're ready to spank me. So. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Anyone from the public wish to comment? Hearing none. On motion by Commissioner Davis, second by Commissioner Slurry. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. We now go to the Enterprise Zone Development Agency. Is there a motion for nominations?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Slurry.
I'd like to nominate 2. I mean, from what the attorneys said, Larry Thomas Hall is excluded from consideration. Is that correct? So,
right.
And
that's correct. And Linda Morgan.
Well, Linda Morgan's not excluded.
No.
And given that she's filling the Affordable Housing Committee, but it's never going to meet or anything like that, I don't think that quite is what she had in mind. And she's a very active member of the Gifford community. So I'd like to nominate her and Mark St. Vincent.
So seconded.
We have a motion from Commissioner Slurry, seconded from Commissioner Flesher for Linda Ann Morgan and Mark St. Vincent. On the commission, is there any discussion on the motion or the nominees?
Not under those, but I guess we'll deal with the next part after the vote.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on these nominations? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. I'm not, Mr. Wilson, I'm not sure what it is you want to present to the board. If you'd like to discuss your new business venture, maybe just next meeting come under public discussion items. So would that be appropriate, or?
I think, Mr. Chairman, I think what it is anyhow, that if my mind serves me correctly, the enterprise zone has by title seats, and I think it's generic to the chambers of commerce. Is that correct? And so I don't know whether we just discussed the enterprise zone and some seats. So I don't know how you are the chairman, and I'll respect your whatever decision you make. But I think that's probably what Mr. Wilson wanted to talk about.
Okay, I think I would prefer that if there is an issue such that we have the the county's attorney office look at the overall ordinance that created the enterprise zone and come back with some clarification of what the board may or may not need to do. And then at that point, Mr. Wilson would certainly be an appropriate time for him to make to comment or participate at that point.
Mr. Chairman, I think I can save you some time because I don't think that would be necessary. If I explain this to you, it's not long, it's not involved. I just really wanted to answer a couple of questions. And one of the main things that I wanted to try to explain to you is that the new Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce is not a new business venture, but it is a new activity. And what our position is referring to the county. There's been a lot of misinformation out there, and frankly, what we're doing is we don't want anything from the county. We're barred from taking any of your money. We don't want to involve ourselves in your economic development. We don't want to involve ourselves in anything that the county has to do. We according to our bylaws, you can't even be members. There are 2 or 3 committees that you may, if you would like us to be able to report what we're doing, that you may want to have seats for. That would be the enterprise zone, which is within the city limits of Vero Beach, and I think economic development, and but whatever ones you wanted us to participate in is what I was trying to tell you, then we'll be happy to participate in. But other than that, we cannot and will not accept any money from the Tourist Development Council, and we will not and ask and do not wish to be involved in your economic development with the Chamber of Commerce. The whole idea is, if you like your chamber, you can keep your chamber. So, everything that you guys do, and so when you come up in the chambers, you say the chamber's doing a great job, we agree with you. Keep doing it. We're doing something else. So, if however, you would like to know the information that's coming forward on the 2,464 occupational licenses that operate within the city limits of the city of Vero Beach and the Barrier Island, we will be happy to appoint someone to whatever boards you say. But it is not necessary for you to go check and see what the laws are, because frankly, what we want from the county commission is absolutely nothing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. DeBraw?
Yes. Both the ordinance and the supporting resolution call for a member from the Indian River County Chamber of Commerce. So and it goes on in detail to describe a financial member or insurance member that serves the zone, a business owner that serves the zone, a resident that lives in the area, not-for-profit, etc. If you would want to change that, it would have to be by ordinance amendment, I should say.
Okay. Thank you. Bill?
And Mr. Chairman, I think in my motion, I probably, looking at this, we probably need to divide it into 2 parts, because it says that 1 vacancy for public at large member, but 1 vacancy for public at large member, unexpired term ending January 15th. So those would be 2 different time periods.
That's correct.
So if I may amend my motion to just have Linda Ann Morgan serve the 1 vacancy for public at large member and 1 vacancy and Mark St. Vincent for the one that has the unexpired term ending January 2015. We'll make that into a form of a new motion, perhaps.
And if it pleases the chair, second so amended.
Okay. So Ms. Morgan will be appointed to the vacancy for the public at large member, and Mr. Mark St. Vincent will be appointed to the public at large member with the unexpired term ending January 2015.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's an amended motion by Commissioner Fleury, seconded by Commissioner Flesher. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
And again, that passes unanimously. Thank you for the clarification, Commissioner Fleury. Commissioner Zork?
Yes, one question. Mr. DeBrawl had read the enterprise zone one. The economic development must read differently because the current chair or the past chair is the representative of the Sebastian Chamber, so that one maybe reads differently than the enterprise zone. I know the enterprise zone is functions a little bit differently in its membership composition.
That's correct. The Economic Development Council has 22 voting members, representatives from all over the place, basically, as far as the different cities and towns across Indian River County, along with the State College, manufacturing, banking, civic, Gifford, real estate, citrus, developer, tourist, local industry, workforce development, to name several of them.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to commissioner items under My Matters. I have a request for the board to consider and approve an application to the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program and authorize matching funding in an amount of up to $50,000 for expansion of our Oyster Reef project. In your backup is some information about the National Estuary Program grant process, and we're kind of coming up to a deadline here, so we need to get this out fairly quickly.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to move this.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Fleury to move forward. Second from Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, yes. I see Chip Swindell is here, and if it pleases the board, it looks like this thing is moving quickly. I just would like to see if you would like to give an update on the current reef project to show the public the importance of at least applying for this grant.
That's fine with me. Chip, you want to say a word or two?
And then I have a question.
It's progressing rather rapidly and as planned, and
actually better than planned.
It's exciting.
Yeah. While he's coming up, Mr. Chairman, I think that really anybody that hasn't had the opportunity to see what has happened in such a short period of time, it's really impressive from an environmental standpoint, and I'll also say from a recreational standpoint, as far as the amount of aquatic life that wasn't there that is there now, just because it truly is the same effect as the reefs that are done out in the ocean, same concept, and it's really get Mr. Swindell, and I'm sure he'll arrange a tour for you, but it's very, very impressive to see that.
Chip, welcome. Good morning.
Thanks for having me. When we did the permitting for this thing, got a comment from the Corps of Engineers about sawfish and sea turtles and what effect it would have on them, and I stuck my foot in my mouth by saying there's no way there's going to be a sea turtle up there. Well, guess what? We have a sea turtle that was grazing on the oyster reef. Otters, cormorants, mergansers. So it's not just what I call water-dependent species-based reef system, and water-dependent species are fish and anything that permanently lives in the water. So as of a month ago, we had about 480,000 juvenile oysters out there, about twice that many barnacles, sea anemones. The fisheries are beyond what we expected, because we have every major game fish now has been seen not just as single fish or single numbers, but in pretty large groups. We have done a quick and dirty wildlife survey on the reef and at several points in the lagoon around the reef. And you're talking the highest number of species we found at any point in the lagoon around the reef was 36, and I think on the reef that we estimated that there were at that point in time approaching 1.5 million different organisms on there. So there's a huge difference in the numbers between the reef that we constructed and what's going on in the lagoon. The literature shows that the reef itself, as far as the oysters and what I call the turf algae, that's this shorter algae that's attached to the concrete that we put out there, is capable of removing literally all of the nitrogen and phosphorus that's discharged down to that FDOT ditch that runs along the north side of Spoonbill Marsh. Now, when I say that, I should clarify that that means that it will directly take some of the nitrogen and phosphorus that comes from the FDOT ditch, and that FDOT ditch does not discharge continuously throughout the year, so it'll be taking nitrogen and phosphorus out of the river itself. So when you balance that, that's more than what that FDOT ditch is estimated to discharge into the river. So from the practical perspective, I think that we could say from a wildlife point of view that we've met and exceeded our expectations. And from a water quality point of view, now that the reef is finally starting to be colonized by the oysters, which will literally be the long-term sink for phosphorus. And there's plenty of evidence in the literature that they facilitate what's called denitrification, where the nitrogen is lost from the water column to the atmosphere, literally. The nitrogen that we think that it'll exceed the expectations on the water quality aspect of what we were shooting for too. So considering that it's January, the middle of winter, and we're still moving at the rates that I just explained, I think that this summer you're going to see a even bigger explosion of the number of organisms that's associated with that reef. Like I said, I am still trying to get over the whole fact that there was a sea turtle out there grazing on the reef. And
you know, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes, sir.
And I think what is so unique about this is the methodology and how it is different than other oyster programs. And that is the substrate at which we put there is a whole lot more significant than the bags of oyster shells that other organizations are using. And I don't know how we would, what they do to the north and to the south of us is extremely important, especially if they're doing some of these same projects. But we really, I don't know whether it's share the technology or lend the expertise or bring them up here and say, hey, this is the success that we've had. We may really want to look into that to just to keep things going in the right direction and giving them the significance of that aha moment that you had, that basically said, listen, it's the substrate that these things need to attach to that's a whole lot more important to make a successful project.
Well, I've already been invited by Brevard County and have done a presentation in Brevard, and I've done a presentation in St. Lucie County. So as far as that goes, we've already done that. And I think that what you're saying is exactly true, because when you start looking at how, for example, the stone crabs are using a select part of the reef as opposed to the whole thing, and certain other organisms are using nooks and crannies in other areas, that if you were to go out, and I don't want to make a comparison, I'm not trying to make a comparison to a real coral reef, but in essence on a coral reef you have all of that three-dimensional structure with nooks and crannies all throughout it, where different organisms can have what I call a refugia, a spot where the other things that normally feed on them can't get to them. And that's what we've created out off of Spoonbill Marsh, is a three-dimensional structure that has varying sizes of, like I said, nooks and crannies, where certain juvenile invertebrates and fish can get in there, but the predators can't. And that's what's making this whole thing come together as a community, as opposed to a single species attractor, like just for oysters or just for some species of fish. And so that, and like I said, we did basically a quick and dirty survey, simply because at that point in time the water clarity wasn't as good as it could have been. And I think that when the summer rolls around, you're going to see the species diversity increase substantially.
Good. Commissioner Fletcher?
Chip, I just want to say it was probably a quick and clear survey looking at the fresh, that clear plume that's coming out of the Spoonbill Marsh that's actually feeding into this. I believe you should plan a trip down to Martin County. I was recently speaking with Joe Negrona, and he had talked about the untimely deaths of all of the oysters that they had seeded out. And I said, therein lies the problem. There was no seeding. Chip Swinville and Charlie Sembler did it the right way. And I think you'll be looking at an invitation. But we want you busy here in Indian River County. That's why we're happy to support this grant.
Well, you know, what was that movie where they said, if you build it, they will come?
Field of Dreams.
And it's just a matter of being able to provide these structures as opposed to a mat that's one-dimensional or two-dimensional, if you will.
Well, you built a field of reality, and we appreciate it.
Commissioner Zork?
Yes, we were just kind of joking. We said, field of dreams, now we have our river of hope, you know, with this oyster project. A couple of questions. When we first started off into this, I talked about the need to kind of test, monitor, document these measurements of success that you're talking about. How will is that data being put out there somewhere where, okay, we started at 00 on this date and we put it in, and then here's the growth rate and the species count and that. Is that being put out somewhere, or will it come out later where it can be, shared to the public?
Yes, it's going to come out later when we would like to do at least one more wildlife survey, and then we've already got the water quality issues started up. So,
okay.
Mind you, we're in the middle of the winter, so we'd like to have, for example, at end of March or something, sample in that time frame where the water is a little bit warmer than it is now, to offset the one sample that we do have right now. But yeah, the day is going to be obviously public, and
right.
Because the grant application that you were talking about a minute ago was supposed to be 6 pages long, and yesterday I was at 9, and I culled it down to 6. But when you're talking about doing a bigger version of what you've already done, and you have information like we have, you want to brag about why it's going to work, because it's already working. And so when you start adding what you've seen and what your goals were and how you achieved them, so that you're looked upon favorably by the people judging these grants, it's hard to say that in 6 pages. So, but yeah, it's part of the information I talked about will be in that grant application.
Right, and I think as Commissioner Fletcher mentioned, the problems in Martin County is and I've met with Charlie before and talked to him about things when they were doing some work in St. Lucie County, another agency, and they said, come down and take a look. And he said, you guys you're doing something, but you're not applying it in the right way, and it's not going to work. And so I think the real credit goes to you two for, one, their historical knowledge of being on the lagoon and growing oysters from a commercial application. They know how to get it done, and they know what works and what doesn't work, and combined with your experience and your background, the combination of the two makes it successful. It wasn't just lucky it turned out this way. It's by design. So thanks for your hard work.
Thanks.
And we're keeping track of the TMDL credits that we'll be able to get for this, correct?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'm just making sure, because this is by far some of the cheapest.
Versus the other options.
I don't want to call it remediation, but the remediation that we've been able to accomplish at this point.
Well, that's a good point, because if you look at the project as with the goals that the NEP sets, and obviously the TMDL is right at the top of the list, nitrogen phosphorus reduction, and you look at the FDOT ditches and realize that the opportunities to deal with those nutrients in those ditches is somewhat limited, because you don't have large quantities of land on the eastern side that you could use for some sort of wetland treatment system or the other things. So you're doing what I call an in situ treatment system, okay? And that is the cost of the project. But then piggyback onto that, it's almost for free that you're getting all these other wildlife benefits.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I think that at some point when we do these reefs, that we need to let people know that all of a sudden now you have, what I would consider a fishing hotspot, and maybe it's going to start attracting people, to the county to fish these areas.
Thank you, Chip. Mr. Baird, in my memo, I didn't identify a funding source, but assuming we are successful in the grant project, you'll be able to take care of our end of the bargain?
Yeah, well,
okay.
That's not going to be a problem. We'll bring it back. If we get the grants in time, we'll bring it back with the grant, but we have no problem with it at all.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any opportunity with FIND on this at all also, you think? Do they fund things like this, or is it, and I'm just throwing that out for additional help, perhaps?
I think they've left the door open to at least ask them on other project opportunities.
Yeah. This was a specific program that NEP had.
No, and I applaud your efforts in Chip's bringing that forward, but just to...
We can certainly ask Mark Crosley if this would be things they could fund in the future, sure. Because I see this as just, step two of a multi-step program that as we find funds and can do these projects to continue as an ongoing program. And
I'll go ahead and go on record in the event that these continue to work out the way it looks like they are, and it is just step two. I'd like to have these in front of every outflow, the DOT outflow on the coast of, or on the west bank of the river.
I'm with you. Okay. Commissioner Slurry, you good?
Fine, thanks.
Okay, thank you. We do have a motion from Commissioner Slurry, second by Commissioner Flesher, to move forward with the application. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
Commissioners, maybe we should ask FDOT if they wouldn't go into the fund. Yeah, in the funding on those outflows. We should put
in all candor. I mean, I think that.
I agree. I got the name from James Wolf a couple of weeks ago of the TMDL person from FDOT, with the idea of going down to have a chat with them to see what type of things we can do. And I'll try to get that done if the board wants in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and specifically ask that question.
And in addition to that, cordially invite them to come look at this project.
All right, I'll do that.
Well, we plan a little more exposure as soon as we can identify a time after we've had some actual testing.
I'll do that. But they also have so much other land that's in the county that I just one of the reasons for wanting to have a chat with them is to see if there weren't other things we might start discussing about using the land for.
Okay.
So.
On that same note, Representative Mayfield has met with the Secretary of DOT, and the outfall map that the mapping department had created, where we took all through Chris Moore and some other contributors to mark all their outfall spots. She presented that to the DOT secretary and said that it's a large contributing factor to pollution to the lagoon, so it shouldn't be a new topic to them. I think the idea of having them chip in and pay for some of that would be, or all of it, would be in their best interest.
Or at least make it as easy as possible.
Right.
I mean, we
could set up, manage it.
But we still have problems with their ditches and the flow of water through the ditches and stuff like that, which is going to impede these projects some. So, I mean, we just need to make sure that they're in the mix and as cooperative as possible, I think.
And they also may have an endless supply of material for the reef projects, as they do have an abundance of old concrete that
That's
could
another
be
good
shaped.
point. Yep.
Okay, by the power vested in me as chairman of the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, I hereby designate Commissioner Bob Slurry to be the chair of the DOT TMDL committee.
Damn, you had to call it a committee.
Working group. The DOT TMDL working group. And you have a sunset period, too, Commissioner.
Excellent, I like that. I feel better and better about that.
April 1st. And he's eligible for that at any time.
Okay, thank you all very much. Appreciate that. And that's a good thing for the lagoon to move forward. So thank you all very much. We
move the minutes of the Solid Waste Disposal District meeting of November 19, 2013.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Slurry, second by Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Item B, the Oslo Convenience Center bill of sale for the utility facilities.
Move staff recommendation.
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Slurry, seconded from Commissioner Flesher. Bill, is there anything on this that we need to know about other than the only cost is the recording fees?
No, sir. This is just a ministerial matter as well.
Very good. Thank you, sir. No further discussion. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously as well. And with that, gentlemen, there being no further business to conduct, we stand adjourned.